This tutorial covers the different shapes of distributions. So recall that a distribution is a way of displaying or describing how all possible data values of a variable occur or have occurred. When describing a distribution, it is important to comment on its center, spread, and shape. So today we're just going to focus on the different shapes of distributions. Okay, so let's make sure we have a good working definition of what the shape means. So a shape is a way of describing how the data looks when graphed. Alright, so let's compare the shapes of the dot plots of the exam scores of 3 different classes. So all of these classes took a test. The test was from 0 to 100, and we got distributions for class G, H, and I. Each dot represents one student's score on that particular exam. Okay, so if we look at these 3 distributions, they all seem to be centered in this same area, around 40 to 60. They all have about the same variability, so that they're all spread out in pretty similar ways. But the big distinction here is the shape. Okay, and one way to think about the shape is to almost draw a line that kind of follows the trend of the data. Okay, so that distribution might look something like that. This distribution might look something like this. And this distribution might look something like this. Okay, so we can see that they have 3 different, pretty distinct shapes. We have a big cluster in the middle here for class G, and it tails off to both sides. Here we have a big cluster on the left side, tails off to the right. And here we have a cluster on the right, tails off to the left. Okay, so let's start assigning some of these shapes some vocabulary terms. So class G has a roughly symmetric distribution. Okay, so again, looking at class G, the top class, we're going to say that it's roughly symmetric. Okay, and what a symmetric distribution is, a distribution where mirror halves can be made with a line drawn down the middle. Okay, and then the mean and median of a symmetric distribution will be the same. Okay, so if we again look at class G, if we were to split this in half around the center, it would seem like, it's not going to be perfect, it's roughly symmetric, but it seems like we would have about 2 different mirror images. Okay, whereas here, for H or I, if we split those down the middle, those certainly would not be symmetric. Okay, so another way to think about a symmetric distribution, so if we're dealing with a histogram like this, this would be a perfectly symmetrical distribution, or symmetric distribution. But generally, with a symmetric distribution, a lot of times, if you've seen a bell curve is symmetric. Sometimes, though, you can have distributions that are symmetric, but they don't necessarily have to look like this. So this one would be symmetric because these 2 peaks are in about the same spot on the other sides of the line. So you can have lots of different symmetric distributions. The key, though, is just to make sure that you have the same thing on each side of kind of this middle line. Okay, if a distribution is not symmetric, sometimes it can be skewed. So a skewed distribution is a non-symmetric distribution that has a tail of values. So the tail values are usually the extreme values above or below the median. Okay, and we talk about 2 different types of skew. A positive skew, sometimes called a right skew, so that's what class H was, and class I had a negatively skewed distribution or a left skewed distribution. Okay, so if we go back again to the classes, this distribution here has a positive skew. Okay, this distribution here has a negative skew. Okay, positive because they're more the tail values are more towards the positive end, and this one is negative because the tail goes toward the more negative values. Okay, again, this is sometimes known as a right skew. This is sometimes known as a left skew. Okay, right versus left. Okay, so then just to make sure you have a good definition of a positive skew and a negative skew, a positively or right skewed distribution is a distribution that has the tail of values above or to the right of the median. Okay, so again, positive skew, the tail is toward the right. Negatively skewed or a left skewed distribution is a distribution that has a tail of values below or to the left of the median. Okay, again, just to reiterate this, positive skew looks like this, negative skew looks like this. Okay, again, it's not skewed toward the large cluster of data. It is always skewed toward the tail. Okay, we really need to make sure that it's a very common mistake is that people think the skew is dependent on where the cluster is. It is where the tail is. Okay, one kind of fun way to remember which direction is the skew is you look down at your feet. Okay, so if you think about skew, if we want to right skew, this is my right foot here. Now, if you think about the big toe almost as the cluster, and it's going to trail off toward the pinky toe. So this would be a right skew on the right foot. Okay, if we look at the left skew, okay, again, the big toe is the cluster. It's going to tail off toward the pinky toe. So your left foot has a left skew. So just kind of a fun way to remember that. This is typically what you'd see on a positively skewed distribution. Okay, again, your tail is toward the positive values. Cluster is toward the more negative values. Okay, a negatively skewed distribution or a left skew. Okay, the negative there, big cluster to the right, tails off to the left. Okay, and the last type of distribution we'll look at is what's called a uniform distribution. A uniform distribution is a distribution where all values have the same frequency. So if we think about a dot plot, just a simple dot plot, and let's say the values from 0 to 4 are possible. Okay, if each of those values had a frequency of 2, this is what we call a uniform distribution. Okay, if you can basically draw a straight line over the tops of all of those boxes, or a straight horizontal line, that's going to be a uniform distribution. Alright, so this tutorial has covered the symmetric distribution, a positively skewed distribution, a negatively skewed distribution, and a uniform distribution. So these are all important shapes that you'll see as you continue to make and look at these distributions. So that has been the tutorial on shapes of distributions. Thanks for watching.